Nigeria, the superpower of West Africa, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Gambia, and the one country which still maintains its position like Sekou Touré did, that it would be non-aligned and neutral. These 5 countries. Ivorians refused to come. Of course, Burkina Faso was not coming. The Senegalese refused to come at first. The Togolese said they were not coming. Benin said they were not coming. So the ECOWAS force was only the force of English-speaking West African country plus Guinea. And so the reality then was that you had to now get into Liberia by hook or by crook. And once Samuel Doe sent out the message that he would turn over power to anybody except Charles Taylor, an interim government, as I said, was formed. And ECOMOG's responsibility was to bring in the interim government, install the interim government, divide the belligerents, separate them, go for a peace conference, and try to resolve the Liberian crisis by taking very little casualties. But you know the history. Taylor refused, established his own government. He said he was not a gun for hire for any politician, and he would fight until he got to Monrovia, fighting in shore, with the backing of his key supporters, the Libyans, the Ivorians, the Burkinabes, and as we have found, others who felt that they could exploit the situation. So we come back again to political opportunism. Why they exploited the situation, why they did not support ECOMOG. That is what the historians are still trying to understand. Had ECOMOG been supported at its fullest by West Africa, the war would have been over. By 1991-92. But there were divisions within ECOMOG, serious divisions. And the Nigerians who took the brunt, the expenses of maintaining the peace, by 1997, with the pressure from back home, they felt that it was enough to give power to Taylor. But that didn't end the crisis in Liberia. It was the beginning of a much more horrendous war, a much more deadly war. The consequences you all know, as many of you were here.
Now, I won't say much of a follow-up, but there were some who appeared before the TRC, well, placing blame on those who had supported the ECOWAS initiative by charging that they were the cause of the problem by forming a government while a president was still sitting in power and creating such a problem. Of course, there are those who dismiss that. What would you say?
But you see, it was very interesting because that's very interesting. Because we were getting intelligence report. I mentioned the visit of Dr. Abbas Bundu to Monrovia, and he was executive secretary of ECOWAS. Dr. Bundu went behind rebel lines, Taylor lines. His impression was that Taylor was popular. The women had spread their lapel for Taylor to walk on like Jesus entering Jerusalem. And my famous quip to him was that, well, you know what happened to Jesus afterwards? He had come to Monrovia. And he had met Samuel Doe in the executive mansion. And Samuel Doe had argued that he would give power to anybody except Charles Taylor, who he condemned as a fugitive and a thief. He said that to Abbas Bundu. And he said, I am ready to move from this mansion with my feet first before giving power to Taylor. So we understood this was going to be a fight to the end. Taylor on one side, over the BBC, referring to Samuel Doe, don't mind that boy. We're not stopping for that boy must come down. Doe on the other side, refusing to accept the indignity, saying to the executive secretary of ECOWAS, who had been sent by the leaders of West Africa, I'd rather die here than turn power over to Taylor. And so, the idea of the interim government was the middle road. Doe is ready to go. He's ready to leave Liberia. If Taylor is interested in elections, let him stop where he is. Let's negotiate. This interim government can only hold power for about 1 year. It will go. It's a temporary solution. He refused. refused. If ECOMOG had not come in, I can say something to you. It would have been a total destruction of this country. It would have been a war which would have engulfed the entire sub-region. Because if ECOMOG had not come in, the Guineans were determined to come in. Based on the ECOWAS Defense Accord, they would have come into those on those sides. The Nigerians would have come in on those sides. The Ivorians would probably have been forced to give more support to the Burkinabes to come in on Taylor's side. This would have been a battleground fought by proxy armies of certain international actors. Our calculation was that the interim government was the only temporary solution. Being an interim government. If you control 90% of the population, you control the country, then let the interim government come and then go for election in 1 year. They refuse, and they attack ECOMOG. The war dragged on. So for those who say, if you had not come in, that again is how policemen think. If Mr. X doesn't go here, why won't happen? It doesn't. If Mr. Taylor had agreed there and then to calculate as a political strategist and say, look, the people want me. I'm popular. In Monrovia, they're saying, let the Taylors stitch everything together. People are shouting, I'm over the radio. The BBC lady told me, I said, why are you always calling Taylor? He said, Taylor is radio. People like to hear him. If you had that support, then go 1 step backward, 2 steps forward. Say, I will hold on to my position, let the interim government come. But I demand we have elections within 9 months. Why did he refuse? Who told Taylor to refuse? It was very simple. Taylor too must have heard what Samuel Doe said. And Taylor's calculation was that if he allowed the interim government to establish itself, the horrors taking place behind his line would be revealed because ECOMOG would go behind there. And once ECOMOG revealed the horror, the masses of the poor would drift down to Monrovia and election would have been lost by Taylor. That was his calculation. I'm convinced beyond all reason without. That's why he formed his government, NPR something government in Banga. As simple as that. So to those who say if ECOMOG had not come, I said please. If ECOMOG had not come, probably we would not have had a library, we would have had arches. Because the Guineans came in ECOMOG, the Nigerians came in ECOMOG. They had the force, the potential. And probably if you say, then Doe would have been in power. Who knows? Historical conjecture again, who knows?
Now, if I should digress a bit, the late Bacchus Matthews, sometime before his death, and this was right around the time when there was much talk in the air about memorializing the affecting officials, government officials who were executed, and an apology from the Liberian government for the execution of those 13 individuals. And in response, more or less, the late Bacchus Matthews had declared that he would have come to the TRC and would have sought to make a case for reparations for those who were killed by the security forces in 1979. Would you have supported such a call? Do you think was it a befitting call, more or less?
But Matthews, I always say Bacchus was a tactician. He realized what he was doing. And this whole idea of reparation, I think he was trying to say, okay, here we are, at this point in history where we are now recognizing the 13. And when you recognize the 13, you are blaming me for my agitation. Let's go back to 1979. What about those who died? And let me say, I will say what the actress and singer and activist Mara Makeba said one time. She had a beautiful song praising Sekou Touré, and she was condemned by some people that Sekou Touré was a tyrant. And Makeba said, in life as in history, we have the right to select our own heroes. We must select our own heroes. For those who feel that the 13 officials were the heroes, don't begrudge them. It's good for them. But we have our own heroes. We have our heroes. Our brothers who were killed in 1979 during the rights demonstration. T.R. Briswell, who died in Belayala. Juan Nimle, and so many others. Koli Tamba, Raymond Horace, all these people, these are our heroes. If anybody feels that they have a right to erect monument and to build law courts or so and name it after a man they consider a hero, then we say to these people, this hero of yours presided over the exoneration of men who killed a guy called Berry because he took a candy from the shop and put in his mouth. Now, if you want to call that man your hero, we have our heroes too. We have our heroes. At the moment they are not recognized, but the time will come when the history of this country is written, they are going to be recognized. So let us don't say we want reparation for anybody. I come back to this idea of asking for blood money. These are historical realities. People were killed because these people felt threatened. They had no regard in the slaughter of these people. But we will never endorse their interpretation of who the two heroes of this country are. That's their perception. They are free to hold that perception. Let them choose the heroes. We will choose our heroes. As simple as that. Why quarrel? Why quarrel with anybody? Somebody mentioned here the case of Matilda Newport. I say to people, but when they have vacation, holidays, Matilda Newport, I don't go observe holidays. Somebody said Topman's birthday. I think it's buried somewhere there. They said Topman's birthday, I go to work. I don't recognize him as a hero. But you can recognize him. That's up to you. If you feel he was a great president of Liberia, I never thought he was a great president of Liberia. So please, allow the people to honor their heroes. We must honor our heroes. And that is why, with all our political differences, as militants, when Brother Bacchus Matthews died, we walked behind his casket from APD headquarters to Atlanta Stadium. We attended his funeral, a befitting funeral for a man that the people recognize as the hero. We were not going to listen to those who will condemn because they have a different interpretation of history. Their interpretation of history is contrary to our interpretation of history. So the question of hero must not be something that we fight over. Like they say, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Another man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I know my heroes. I follow my heroes. I honor them. Others, while they're celebrating the birthday of the heroes, I don't go. I don't honor them. And what is so interesting, nobody has asked me the question of why I will not go to a law school which has been dedicated for such and such a person. Nobody dare ask me that question. I'm nobody's servant. I'm a public servant. Nobody will say to me, why didn't you leave your house and go and put a flower on top of my grave? Nobody dare ask me that. And as long as you respect me and you respect my perception of who my heroes are, you can go ahead with your masquerade. It's up to you. And so we live and we all decide to work together for Liberia. The question of heroes is just like food or the wives we choose. It's a matter of individual taste. The food you eat, the food I eat, I will taste. The women we marry, I will taste. As simple as that. And that's how the whole question of hero is. And what we must never allow those who were part and parcel of that which we resisted to make us feel guilty. We can never be considered victims.
Finally, as we engage in the TRC process intended to contribute, so to speak, to lasting peace in Liberia, from your perspective, what would you consider as potential threats to peace and stability in Liberia and in the sub-region on the whole?
Commissioner Stewart, I was asked to talk on 79 to 203. And, it's a very tough one for me simply because whatever I say now will be interpreted as coming from the National Security Advisor. These are modern times. I think I will just be superficial as much as possible.
You don't have to answer if you...
No, I will be superficial, very superficial. I think there's a question of the democratization of the space that we have here. We must find a way whereby the next political dispensation we can decentralize power as much as possible to the rural areas. The involvement of the people in the selection of the leaders at the various levels, the electing officers like superintendent and the local parliaments. Every county has its own local parliament. We must move away from this idea that people who represent district represent an entire country. We must bring more people on board in the legislature. I mentioned having about 25 or 30 seats put aside for representatives of the workers' union, representatives of the farmers' union, representative of the religious council, representative of the student movement. So if we go into a legislature of 64 elected representatives, we must then have about 35 or 40 representatives cutting across all tribal groupings, represented institutions. Bring people on board, more people on board. Engage the people. Our teacher Malemu Nerere taught us that in the third world, a leader does not just give instruction. A leader is also a teacher. You have to engage our people constantly. Obviously, there are people who feel serious grief. There are people who feel they have been wrong. Our duty is to engage them. It's not that you change the hearts, but we engage in them. We talk into them. Regionally, steps have been put into place by ECOWAS to handle the situation. That there can be no more eruption like the Liberian Civil War that spilled over into Sierra Leone, that spilled over into Guinea, that spilled over into the Ivory Coast. ECOWAS has put into place mechanism to address these things. The United Nations has put in place mechanism to address these things. Locally, what we probably need before our next election is to have a national sovereign conference where representatives of all the people, the chiefs, the farmers, the students, the workers, the market women, representatives, we can all sit down and discuss for a month what is the itinerary of the march. Where do we go? After elections in our country, what then do we do to get our people involved? This is necessary. Because the people who resent power the most, are those who feel feel that they are marginalized without any attempt to reach out to them in any society, not just in Liberia. It's a matter of calling people and discussing. Because we were getting worried. I for one was getting worried until people started saying, but we seem to be going back into the same thing. And they say, Fahnbulleh, we condemn you. Because all your preaching, when it came to the last election, you didn't support a populist candidate. And I said, excuse me, running a modern state is a very complex thing. You don't play with people's destiny like that. What we'll do will now empower all Liberians. I'm happy when I see the members of the legislature, brothers from among the people who are engaging the executive branch of government. This is healthy. The next election is going to be healthier because many young men will come. They now see that they can influence things in the legislature. It's going to be very competitive, and we must encourage this. That is why the newspapers, I think they have 40-something from my latest count, they come out intermittently. But let the people speak. Let them go over the radio. Let them say what they want to say. If you are not satisfied, engage them in a debate. The idea of political tolerance is to persuade people to follow you, not to brutalize them into keeping quiet. Brutalized people who keep quiet are very dangerous people. Because whatever happens, they will stand aside and see you doing battle with those who want to get at you. The more involved the people are, the more we engage them, the better. The better. So I will say, open up the democratic space. Let the people discuss. I think the Chinese said something like, let 100 flowers blossom, let 1,000 schools of thoughts contend. Let them say what they want to say over the radio, over the FM, in the Hatay Center. I spoke to the Swedish ambassador. He said, if you have one desire, what will you ask me to do? I said, I will beg you to find money and build 3 or 4 libraries in Liberia and stack them with books and documents so our people can read, so they can argue from informed perspective. So let them talk. It is their country. If they are conscious and go to the polls, if they want to gamble with their destiny, that is their responsibility. Let them answer to their children. I hope, for the sake of the Republic, my people and my children, I hope I have not gambled wrongly. So far, I do not think I've gambled wrongly. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Fahnbulleh, thank you very much for the elaborate and wonderful presentation that you just made to us. First of all, I was very impressed by your depth of knowledge and understanding of the struggle here in Africa for freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Secondly, I was also inspired by your passion for what you believe. And thirdly, your honesty to accept responsibility for what you did after 1980 and not pass the buck, but rather be willing to work in rebuilding and changing things for the better. I also agree with you that historically a time had come in history where change was inevitable. Our only point of difference may be the methodology of that change. So my first question has to do with the point that, do you believe that the methodology of change can affect the influence of the change at the end? For example, we had a change that involved a violent revolution. whereas there have been other historical examples of revolution. You compare the Russian Revolution, which was about the French Revolution rather, which was violent and bloody, with the so-called Glorious Revolution of England, which was more a passive but yet focused change.